What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing good. It's a beautiful day. It's always a pleasure to discuss with you and commune with you in this brotherhood we've created. Thank you very much for being part of this. I really appreciate you guys. If this is your first time, please come join us. You do this for, you know how it works, and join us, be part of us so we can grow this community. I'm sure we're going to share plenty of things together that we'll all enjoy. So today we're going to talk about Africa once more. It's a very interesting subject here. We all know when it comes to China, the West try to make us believe so many negative things. They say Chinese are in Africa to steal from Africans. Chinese are in Africa looking for their own interest. Chinese will trap you, they say. The Chinese trap. So we're going to give you money, talking about the Chinese. Chinese will give you money to do whatever you want, to do your infrastructure, and they will ask you to pay. And once you have to pay and you are unable to pay the Chinese money, then they're going to trap you and take whatever they want, either your minerals or your ports or your town or something. They call it the Chinese trap. So basically, the West has been trying for many years to make us believe that the best option that Africa has is the West. Be afraid of the Chinese. Be afraid of the Russians. They're bad people. We're going to listen to this man, very interesting view of him, and I'm going to make a comment right after. Let's go.
China is not holding guns to our heads and telling us that if you need assistance from me, you have to have this kind of government or that kind of government. The West insists that if you want to deal with them, you need to have a certain kind of government. They even go to the extent of determining who should be our leaders even today. On February 24, 1966, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America overthrew the Nkrumah government. They actually organized the overthrow of the most prominent leader of the African people. They killed Patrice Lumumba. French, Belgium, and other Western intelligence services came together and they killed Patrice Lumumba. They dissolved his body in acid and took out his front teeth as souvenir. This barbarism has never been exhibited by China. Today, everywhere in Africa, everywhere in the world, the West is bombing democracy into our people.
And that's a very interesting point. All the guns that have been pointed at us have never come from China. All the hurt, all the pain, all the drama never come from China. It came from the West. Yes, and the West is the people who are today trying to teach us about democracy, how to respect other people's rights, how to not infringe other people's autonomy. But that's exactly what we live for centuries. Interesting. Let's listen.
Indeed, throughout our history, our people have never been slaves to China. China never enslaved us. China didn't colonize us. China always stood on our side as a friend. We struggled against apartheid, and apartheid is the worst form of racism. Who were the people who supported the apartheid regime? Which institutions supported the apartheid regime? It was the Western institutions. Non-governmental organizations from the West, the Western military establishment, the Western intelligence services, and so on, supported apartheid. We were supported by China.
And this is very interesting. Apartheid only ended in 1994. So just imagine in 1993, people still supported the apartheid regime against black people of South Africa. People that you see today, yes, those that come here and teach you about democracy, respecting people's rights, people have choice of living and choosing whatever, however they want to live life. These are the very same people that supported brutal apartheid regime against the South African people. Unbelievable.
Non-governmental organizations from the West, the Western military establishment, the Western intelligence services, and so on, supported apartheid. We were supported by China. So China throughout history has been a friend that does not impose his will on our people. There is talk of the possibility of China assuming the role that the Western powers have assumed. That possibility does not exist. Listen, until recently, if you wanted to make a telephone call from Ghana to Togo, you had to route that call through Paris or London. Even now, if you have to travel to some African countries from an African country, you have to route your flight through Europe. China is helping us to build that critical infrastructure which makes us independent and which promotes trade among the African people and which facilitates exchanges amongst the African people. Some of the projects that China is embarking upon in Africa are railway lines. Railway lines linking one African capital to the other. That is in our interest. Indeed, I like to look at the railway lines in my own country And I look at the railway lines in my own country and they tell a story. What is the story do these railway lines tell? They always start from areas of concentration of wealth and end up in the ports. So there's a railway line from the area which has bauxite, it ends up in the port. Railway lines from areas where we have timber, it ends up in the port. Railway lines from the gold mines, they end up in the port. This is symptomatic of the colonial economy.
Wow. You see that? That is obvious. There is no way you're going to escape from that. It's like you're going into a trial in court and they bring the proofs. Chinese railway leave from one city to the other, from one African country to another. The Western railway come from places of concentration of wealth to the port. Bauxite to the port. Gold to the port. Diamond to the port. So it's very clear. The objective of the West in Africa was never to build. It was not to construct. It was not to grow Africa. The objective and the goal of the West was very clear. We're coming to steal and destroy and take by force.
Okay, we give them aid. Aid for what? It's all bullshit. You know? And at least the Chinese don't enter into that bullshit. They say, we don't care about the whole political environment, we just give the money.
So today, they try to make us believe that China is bad. China should be avoided. China is the danger. I don't think we should believe that. We're not saying that China is perfect. China is definitely not perfect. China has its own issues. China needs to educate Chinese who come to Africa when some of them actually behave in a very inappropriate way toward Africans. You know, many places like in Zambia, for instance, where Chinese open shops and restaurants where only Chinese nationals were allowed. We've seen Chinese open barbershop where only Chinese people were allowed. And that is not acceptable. And these people need to be educated. But on the grosso of the story, on the big line of the story, the Chinese people come with a contract that's very open, very clear. We're going to bring you money to sponsor whatever you want to do, to build your infrastructure. You're going to respect us, we're going to respect you. Nobody mingling into anybody's business. We're not going to teach you how to live your life. We're not going to force you how to live your life. We're not going to tell you how to live your life. You do your own things in your own way, in your own terms. Just pay our debt. That's all. As opposed to the West that comes to Africa, here's money, here's what we can do for you. But in the meantime, you want to build the infrastructure, we got a company out here that's going to build your infrastructure. We can only sponsor you if you are hiring this company that I'm presenting you. So I cannot give you the full amount of money, I can give you portion by portion, small, like a child. That's how we're going to manage. And if you're not okay with that, we're going to sanction you. And we're going to bring you our ideas, bring you our mentality. We're going to ask you and force you to adopt our way of life. If you refuse to do it, we're going to hit you with sanctions, like they did with Zimbabwe. Don't talk, don't claim, don't speak about things that bother you. If you speak about them, we're going to sanction you. That's the way of the West. But on the other hand, even though Chinese are not perfect, they come to Africa very clearly. Here is the contract. We want to work with you. You can gain this and that out of this, and we can gain this. Let's respect the clause of the contract and let's work together. That's how the Chinese are. That's the difference.
So we did not build infrastructure in order to facilitate exchanges between our people. We did not build infrastructure in order to ensure that we are taking raw materials to areas of production and so on. This is what we want to reverse. And this is what Chinese technology and Chinese finance is helping us to achieve. This is not neocolonialism. This is partnership in development.
So this is very simple, as you can see. The goals are very different. China is not a perfect partner, but China has shown its will to work fairly with many countries. And that's perhaps the reason why you can see even Saudi Arabia and Iran trusting China to bring them together because there's no interest. Saudi Arabia and Iran were enemies for a long time until China came along and said, you know what? Sit down, let's have a talk. Let's find a solution for both of you so we can live in peace.
That China is not holding guns to our heads and telling us that if you need assistance from me, you have to have this kind of government or that kind of government.
China is not holding guns on our heads, saying if you need assistance from me, you need to have this sort of government.
The West insists that if you want to deal with them, you need to have a certain kind of government. They even go to the extent of determining who should be our leaders even today. On February 24, 1966, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America overthrew the Nkrumah government. They actually organized the overthrow of the most prominent leader of the African people. They killed Patrice Lumumba. French, Belgium, and other Western intelligence services came together and they killed Patrice Lumumba. They dissolved his body in acid and took out his front teeth as souvenir. This barbarism has never been exhibited by China. Today, everywhere in Africa, everywhere in the world, the West is bombing democracy into our people and destroying what used to be paradise. They bombed Libya. They destroyed Libya. They killed Gaddafi. And today there is total chaos in Libya. You understand? So this is the difference between the Western approach to developing relationships with us and the Chinese approach to developing relationships with us. They come with sanctions and injunctions. You do this or we sanction you. You do this or we bomb you, and so on. That has been the relationship. That relationship must change, and we will definitely ensure that that relationship changes. Because that relationship is not in our interest, and that relationship cannot contribute to the building of a new world without a bomb. To the building of a new world in which we all see ourselves as equal partners in the preservation of life.
This is crazy. You said it perfectly clearly, and I don't see myself adding anything on top of it. Very simple. African leaders who have come to Africa in the goals of rectifying Africa, making Africa a better place, were all finished. African leaders that were genuinely for African advantages and goals and bonuses and wins were all finished. But the African leaders that worked for the profits of the West were all that were praised. They were never accused of barbarism, never accused of dictatorship or anything like that. In the likes of Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara worked very hard for his country. He promoted women into government. He reduced his own salary. He refused to drive in Mercedes and chose to drive in cheaper cars. Thomas Sankara promoted production of clothes from his own country. He says our country do not need to be begging. He was finished. Lumumba came fighting for the rights of Africans. He wanted the autonomy of Africans. He wanted his people to own economy. He was finished. Muammar Gaddafi came forward with the very same goals of pushing forward Africans, promoting the gold binds currency that Africans should exchange within themselves, making Africa the most proeminent and the most richest continent in the world. He was finished. The late president of Tanzania, John Pombe Magufuli, came with the same mentality. He never went to Europe one time. He spent money from the tax to rebuild this country. Great president. He was finished. We know that. Who wants the goodness of Africa? Africans need to begin loving themselves and putting themselves first. Removing the boundaries and the bondages of borders. Starting from the head. Beginning to look at the same way. Beginning to have the same direction.
What we have is the rich control. The rich set up these institutions explicitly to control the poor countries.
Stop stealing from our own people in order to move forward. This is very interesting, fellas. Let me know what your take on this. China is not our enemy. No, they're not our brothers. We know that. They're in Africa for their own interest, like everybody else. Of course, that's what you expect when you're doing exchange or transaction with anybody. Chinese compared to the West, who are the worst? Who have proven to be not good to Africa? You let me know. God bless.